Hi, this is Dr. Christine Bishara doing another part 3 in my series with Hg Tudor, a diagnosed narcissistic psychopath. I've been doing these interviews with him because I've seen such a prevalence of narcissistic personality disorder in today's society, and I think it's only going to get worse. And I feel like so many people don't really know what to look for when interacting with a narcissist. So I'd love to get more feedback from Hg Tudor, who has been really instrumental in providing so much knowledge and education through his YouTube channel. So I'd like to do another part with him. Hg, thank you again for joining me. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, Christine. Thank you for inviting me back. I'm Hg Tudor, which is a pseudonym that I use. I keep my own identity private and hidden for reasons which essentially are obvious. And I am, as Christine mentioned, a diagnosed narcissistic psychopath. And as part of the extension of my legacy, I made my business to educate people about what we really are like, what goes through our minds, why we behave the way that we do, how you're able to deal with us, and unraveling all of those mysteries about our behaviors.
Thank you so much. So let's get right to it. So my first question for you, and anyone who's watching this is part 3. If you haven't seen the other 2, please watch part 1 and part 2, because I think they're really instrumental in helping you understand everything that Hg is speaking about. So my question is, I know a lot of your YouTube videos focus on narcissistic personality disorder in the romantic context, but I'd love to kind of dissect a little bit of how you feel about parental narcissism, in particular mothers who are narcissists, relation to their sons, who I have read tend to sometimes pass that resentment that they have for their mother onto their primary partner, the intimate partner, primary source, as you call them. So I'd love to hear a little bit of feedback from you on that, what your thoughts are on that.
Okay. Well, it is correct that a lot of my material addresses the romantic dynamic, but there is also quite a decent sliver of material that deals with the parental aspect also, alongside a very useful assistance package, which can be found in my knowledge vault called How to Handle the Parental Narcissist. And it's also applicable to if you have a child, an adult child that's a narcissist, or a sibling that's a narcissist. Anyway, in terms of the dynamic and this suggestion that the son of a female narcissist passes on that resentment, it's partially correct. It isn't that that narcissist has at the heart of him this burning resentment all the time in respect of his mother towards any female, particularly those that are of an intimate nature that crosses his path, but rather it feeds into what happens when somebody threatens our control. Invariably, a son who is, if he's not a narcissist himself, may find himself, of course, becoming one during those formative years as a consequence of the behavior of his mother towards him. And so, if the mother's a narcissist, then she may well pass the genetic predisposition towards narcissism onto her son. And invariably, because she is a narcissist, she will, unless there's an intervener, create a lack of control environment during those formative years for that boy. And then he becomes the narcissist. We have those 2 essential ingredients. When he is an adult, when somebody threatens his control at a subconscious level, that person is essentially stepping into the shoes of that first abuser, namely his mother. And therefore, the conduct of that person threatening his sense of control takes him back at a subconscious level to his mother doing the same to him when he was a weak and defenseless little boy. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be his girlfriend or his wife, but rather anybody who threatens his control. His narcissism detects that there's a threat to control, and it's as if he's dealing with that first primary abuser, once again, who happened to be his mother. Now, of course, unless this young man is homosexual, then he'd likely take a female as his partner. And most narcissists, particularly those of a lesser and mid-range variety, require an intimate partner primary source, which means he'll have a girlfriend, a female partner, he will have a wife. And because he spends the majority of his time with her, because she's the primary source, that also means that she is the one that's most likely to threaten his sense of control. And therefore, she is the one who's most likely to subconsciously step into the shoes of the first abuser, the mother. Furthermore, as the intimate partner primary source of that narcissist, behind closed doors, if you're dealing with a mid-range narcissist, there's no facade. So where a friend might threaten that narcissist's sense of control, the facade may well operate to prevent the narcissist lashing out at that friend to preserve the facade. So whilst that friend also similarly steps into the shoes of that first abuser, the response of the narcissist, guided by the narcissism, is different, because the facade dictates you can't lose your shit in this position with your friend in front of all of the other friends, because then you'd lose control of them as well, and the facade would be damaged. So instead, the narcissist may just fall quiet and assert control with a present silent treatment, or perhaps come out with a pithy, witty remark that puts that person down, rather than going over and headbutting them. However, furthermore, that friend is dealt with on a shelf basis. The narcissist doesn't spend a hell of a lot of time with the friends, back and forth, in and out. And therefore, not only is that friend going to be treated differently because of the presence of the facade, they also have less opportunity to step into the shoes of that primary abuser. Contrast that with the wife or the girlfriend. One, invariably, many of their dealings, the facade doesn't apply because it's just the two of them. There's nobody watching the interaction. And two, because she is the primary source, she basically is going to be spending more time in the minefield than anybody else. Thus, she repeatedly steps into the shoes of that primary abuser. So what it creates is this idea that he is against her and resents her because of the way that the mother has treated him. But it's actually not quite right. There is a degree of resentment, but that resentment is towards anybody that threatens his sense of control. It just gives the appearance of it being the girlfriend or the spouse, because that's the person he's with the most and stands the greatest risk of offending that need for control.
That makes sense. I'm curious, because you had mentioned the mid-rangers don't have a facade at home where they do in public. Is it just the primary partner, or is that facade also like down with like children, for example, in the household? Like, do children see a different person than the mom, for example?
So there'll be instances whereby the narcissist will behave in a particular way vis-a-vis when it's just him and mother, abuses her. If the children enter the room, bang, the facade kicks in, and he suddenly changes his behavior. In some instances, it depends upon the level of threat to control, because the facade fights to keep itself in place when there's other people around, but it's not always successful. And that's linked to the type of narcissist, the type of mid-ranger, and the level of threat to control. At the end of the day, control outranks facade. So if the facade has to break so that control can be achieved, it will. And that's why sometimes certain narcissists have that flip out moment that the facade crumbles. Sometimes you just see a slight crack in it. So for example, with Harry's wife, you might see the occasional death stare that's given, and then it goes, because in that moment, the facade couldn't quite keep it at bay, and then it gets a grip. It's almost like the ignited fury took the facade by surprise, and the facade's got, oh, flipping heck, we need to do something here. And it's been sat on the toilet, has to pull its trousers up and get back into the fray. And then immediately goes, whoa, 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 we can't be showing that death stare here. But it's already too late. There's been a little glimpse of it. So it all depends upon the circumstances of the type of narcissist and the level of threat to the control that's occurring. Many narcissists are able to keep that facade very much in place. Others, they will struggle to do so.
I'm assuming the ones who struggle are the lessers who just can't control.
Well, lessers don't tend to use a facade. They don't have a facade. Mid-rangers have facades. Lessers, it's more about just keeping the beast under wraps rather than operating a particular facade. You see, for, lower mid-rangers tend to have a facade of a decent guy, but maybe slightly flawed, a bit of a rough diamond. Middle mid-rangers basically operate a facade of, I'm a really kind and helpful person, and I love looking after people, and I'm a decent individual. That's middle range type A. Middle range type B is, I'm a really kind of decent person. I look after people. I just don't understand why so many people have it in for me. Upper mid range is a facade of superiority. Yeah, I'm the best surgeon in this hospital, and if you don't like that, go and get a job elsewhere. And invariably, they are the best surgeon in the hospital. But they operate with that facade, that cockiness, which is passed off as a means of controlling people. And yeah, I do a lot of good for people, but that's because I'm the best. So it's linked in with this notion of the mid-ranger of always being a decent person, whereas the lesser doesn't go around thinking they're a decent person. But their narcissism will, of course, try and keep the beast under control, because if the first thing that a narcissist does on meeting a potential target is punch them in the face, he's going to lose control of them straight away. So that beast has to be kept under control. That's not the facade. The facade is portraying something else to a wide range of people.
Yeah, makes sense. So what about so we talked about the mother who's a narcissist. What about like parental narcissists who kind of designate one child as the golden child, one child as the scapegoat? Is there any kind of reason why one is picked versus another? I've read somewhere that like an older child or a good-looking child is kind of given the glorious trophy of being the golden child versus the child that isn't so wonderful in the looks department or whatever.
It comes down to, as ever, the link to the prime aims. What is it that the narcissist either consciously, they're aware, or unconsciously needs? Control, fuel, character traits, and residual benefits. If you're a good little appliance that's easy to control, provides plenty of fuel, decent character traits, and fantastic residual benefits, you'll be painted white. You're golden. But if you're difficult to control, not so reliable with regard to fuel, don't really provide any particular good character traits or residual benefits, you will end up being painted black. So if you've got one child who's academically superior, is good looking, is socially acceptable, and has a range of success extracurricular activities, that child, of course, is a little mirror for the narcissist, and therefore, and behaves themselves, and therefore easy to control, providing fuel as a non-intimate secondary source, provides a range of character traits for that narcissist to commandeer. Their success is the narcissist's success. He gets his looks from me, his academic qualifications. Well, that's because, he's got my brains on my side of the family. Oh, I'm the one that taught him French. I coached him at baseball, whatever it might be. And then the residual benefits that may occur also. So that's a good little appliance. So it becomes the golden child. Whereas the runt of the litter, well, unfortunately, he looks like Quasimodo. And because of that, he's given a hard time, and the poor soul then reacts to that by not behaving himself. And therefore, because he doesn't behave himself, he becomes more problematic with regard to the issue of control. And he's not particularly interested in school. He doesn't have many friends. He's not very good at sport. And therefore, what's he got to offer to the narcissist? Nothing but a pain in the backside. Therefore, he's designated scapegoat.
Right. And the scapegoats usually grow up to be empaths, you think, or does it not?
Not always. Not always. That they could turn out to be a narcissist, because both of those children could become narcissists. The golden child, because let's say father is the narcissist, he passes on his genetic predisposition to the elder son, and because that son, everything he does is gold. And therefore he's given a smooth ride through everything. And he's told he's even better than he actually is. He has no real control over his world. So therefore you have a lack of control environment allied with a genetic predisposition. He could become a narcissist. Scapegoat, genetic predisposition again provided by father. And because he's basically repeatedly abused. You're useless. You're not good enough. I don't even know why I bothered with you. You're not my child. I think, your mum had a fling with a milkman, that type of thing. That child is then suffering a lack of control environment in a different way. So it could form two narcissists. Of course, if the genetic predisposition isn't passed down, then you could end up with a normal or an empath. More likely an empath, because they're being subjected to the behavior of a narcissist, which could create in them the addiction to narcissists, of course.
Yeah, we do know that. So empaths and their addiction to narcissists. So, it's funny, like, I feel like empaths and narcissists are very similar in a lot of ways. They both use people, right, to validate themselves. A narcissist will use people to validate themselves, but they end up hurting them. Whereas an empath is a complete opposite. They'll end up hurting themselves, right? But they're so helpful to others. So in a way, I find them very similar.
Yes.
And I find them both kind of like this dysfunctional pattern. But I guess
Mm-hmm.
to the outside world, an empath is not seen as the evil, horrible narcissist, but they have inner wounds, I think, similar to narcissists. So I know you also have like a breakdown of empaths. So maybe talk a little bit about that dysfunction, and also different types of empaths and how you think they come about.
Okay, well, I've mentioned this on other occasions, but if you envisage a clock, okay, and start at 11 o'clock, that's where the empath is, and then at 1 o'clock, that's where the narcissist is. If you go from 11 o'clock clockwise to 1 o'clock, it's not far to travel at all. And that's the similarities that you have between the empath and the narcissist. If you go anti-clockwise or counterclockwise from 11 till 1, they're absolute poles apart. So there is that closeness and yet that distance between the two.
Yeah, that's a good way.
Narcissists, as you, so narcissists find validation by controlling people, which sometimes is benign, often malign, and drawing fuel from those individuals. So the narcissist lives through other people in that regard. Then, with regard to an empath, as you rightly pointed out, they gain validation through helping people. And often they self-flagellate, particularly, of course, when it comes to the narcissist. And externally, you think you're not dealing with a saint. Empaths aren't saints. But you see somebody that seems to be a decent person, but then their life turns to crap around the narcissist. Away from narcissists, they're helpful, functioning, decent individuals. Sometimes they have problems with boundary recognition. But the problem for them really only manifests when they come close to a narcissist because of the presence of the addiction, the emotional thinking that goes with that, and of course, the behavior of the narcissist. So a narcissist, of course, is only regarded as dysfunctional by the majority of society. It works for us, it just doesn't work for you. If we were the majority, you'd be the dysfunctional ones. So, as I explained many times, as a matter of perspective, but given that we are the minority, albeit a sizable one, we are seen as the dysfunctional ones. But our narcissism works for us. With the empath, it's the case that other than being alongside the narcissist, you wouldn't describe them as dysfunctional, but you would describe the fact that having that addiction to the narcissist is a dysfunction, and of course results in internal dysfunction for them when dealing with the narcissist. I explain to my clients, having the addiction per se isn't a problem. It's only a problem when you're dealing with a narcissist. Then that leads to difficulties for you. If you're not, it's not going to generate a problem for you. So those are some of the sort of similarities and differences that occur vis-a-vis the concept of dysfunction. Now, as part of helping people understand about themselves, as I repeatedly explained to them, Christine, that first of all, you need to understand what you're dealing with, what all of that means, and how that impacts upon you and what you do about it. But it's also just as important to understand what you are. And invariably, empaths are the ones that are caught by us because you're the easiest ones to ensnare and keep ensnared. Now, I categorize empaths into schools and cadres. So in terms of schools, you have standard, super, codependent, contagion. They have a similarity, namely, they all have considerable emotional empathy for a wide range of people. And then they have differences. Too many to go into in detail, but quite simply, codependents very much are validated by their existence alongside the narcissist, and they suffer the addiction but worse than anybody else. They pour themselves into the black hole that is the narcissist and gain validation by giving and giving and giving and giving. They often find it extremely difficult to move themselves away from the narcissist and stay away from narcissists. Super empaths are not kick-ass ninja types that go around slaying narcissists left, right, and center. Those that think that they are super empaths are invariably unaware mid-range narcissists. Super empaths are individuals that have a greater degree of resilience, and when the tanks are parked on their lawn, they resist and respond to it at a much earlier juncture compared to other types of empath. There are other aspects about them as well. The contagion is the one that has the contagion empathy, which goes above and beyond emotional empathy. It's a form of emotional empathy, but they have a visceral reaction to the energy, the emotions of other people, so that they take on that energy. They can feel overloaded by the presence and emotions of other people. They have a greater degree of instinctive response to people. So those are some of the similarities and differences that happen with the various schools of empath. There's a lot more I can go into, but that would take up a lot more time. We then have the cadres, which are magnet, savior, carrier, martyr, and alongside that, there's also the fifth one, which for the moment has escaped my thoughts, Giza, or Gazer, or Giza. Okay, so there's carrier, magnet, martyr, savior, and Giza. Now, with those, again, there's a lot of detail, but basically the carrier is your spear holder. They take on the mantle of responsibility and they ensure that they look after people. They are that reliable individual that deal with childcare arrangements, domestic duties. They perhaps are the major breadwinner or the sole breadwinner, and they do lots for other people. Magnet is a charismatic, magnetic empath that people are naturally drawn to. And often people want to share their experiences with that magnet. The magnet finds themselves often listening to strangers' stories because people feel this comfort and sense of security around them. The martyr is carrier 2.0, where they show a slavish devotion to the needs of the narcissist to the extent that they suffer some form of harm or loss as a consequence of discharging those obligations. So the carrier will, for instance, be the breadwinner and be supportive. The martyr would go even further, for instance, by giving or lending money to the narcissist not returned. Or the martyr might attend to the sexual needs of the narcissist to the extent that their own are neglected, or being forced to engage in certain sexual practices that they find abhorrent, but they go through with them anyway for the purposes of appeasing and placating the narcissist. The savior is often seen in many empaths, and this is basically riding into the midst of battle for and on behalf of the narcissist. Sometimes it's to save the narcissist from a particular situation that they're in. In other instances, it's to defend the narcissist against a threat elsewhere. Lots of different ways this is done. Saving the narcissist, in terms of if they've got difficulties with alcohol, saving the narcissist, they've got financial problems, giving them somewhere to live, helping them out, for instance, with repeated presentations they have to make. There's lots of different ways that occurs. Then finally, with the geezer, this is an individual that fountains with fuel, and depends upon the extent of the geezer cadre. Essentially what happens is, let's say if they're happy, then it manifests as ecstasy. Where they're upset, it's absolutely distraught. Where they're in pain, it's agonizing pain. So they have a heightened emotional response, which means that their fuel output is greater. Now, all of those different schools and cadres, there's different combinations which appeal to different types of sub-school of narcissists that are most attracted to a particular type. Doesn't mean that if you're a particular combination, you'll always get that type of narcissist, because there might not be any knocking around. So somebody might be an individual that attracts, let's say, middle greater narcissists more than others. But if you don't go in the circles where middle graders are, you're not going to have one ensnare you. So you're likely to be ensnared by a different one. You're still attractive to all narcissists because you're an empath. It's just that certain subschools are more attracted to you than they are to other types of empath.
What percentage of the population do you think are empaths? I know you think like up to 20% are narcissists. Do you have any idea how much of the population is?
Roughly speaking, I'd say about 2 in 6 of the population are empaths.
Okay, 2.6 you said?
2 in 6. So 1 in 6 narcissists, 2 in 6.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Empaths, 3 in 6 normals.
Okay, interesting. Okay, well, since we're on the topic of empaths and narcissists and how they differ, so everyone knows and everyone says, stay away from the narcissist. They're going to end up hurting you. So narcissists are portrayed as these people who are just malicious and evil, right? Well, okay, so the facade is they present themselves as not this, and then eventually that facade kind of, some people see through it. So I've seen where people say the mask comes off because eventually you'll see the true person. But, you know, one school of thought is the true narcissist is actually that person who's vulnerable and compassionate and kind, that person that you see in the beginning. And because of whatever happens from their inner wounds, are, you know, reminded of the abuse or whatever it was that you know, they carry wounds from in childhood. It's they put this blockade, and then that blockade is what portrays them as the evil and the malicious, and, you know, the one that does all those other hurtful things. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Now, the true self of a narcissist is basically something that can't function in the outside world, hasn't learned how to do so, and is essentially this pathetic individual that is paralyzed and unable to deal with it. When people talk about the mask comes off and you see what they really are, you're not. What you're seeing is that's another facet of the narcissism. The narcissism is designed to protect that true self with a construct. And that construct is composed of a benign side and a malign side. Now, it has to operate with a benign side, which is either a veneer, the facade, or just quite simply, as I mentioned earlier, keeping the dark side, the beast, hidden. Because, as I've made mention many times, if I walked into a bar, and let's say you're sat there and I sidle up to you, and I go, hello, Christine, I'm Hg Tudor, I'm a narcissistic psychopath. Would you like to be my girlfriend so I can abuse you within an inch of your life? You'd probably go, my goodness me, no. And you'd end up hurling your drink at me and probably giving a scream and running away from me. So I've lost control of you immediately. So that approach of telling you what I am, and bear in mind I'm aware, but similarly, let's assume, for instance, I'm not aware, and my narcissism operates so that I go up to you and I say to you, oh, hello, well, I don't think very much of what you're wearing. And I beg your pardon, and you go, you look like a complete whore. You go, you probably swear at me, say, stay away from me, you rude man. I've just lost control of you. So what the narcissism does is ensure with the best prospects of success, we're camouflaged. Like any good predator, one needs to fit in. So that side of the narcissism causes us, either consciously or for most narcissists subconsciously, to behave in a way of being polite and being kind and being fun and flattering you and complimenting you and buying you a drink and mirroring you and feigning interest in your interests, although we believe that it's genuine where it's an unaware narcissist, so that we fit in. So the veneer that you receive and the facade that third parties see is a construct from the narcissism to enable us to ensnare you and dupe them. Then in certain instances, because of that need for control, the dark side is allowed out, because that's very effective at getting you under control. But of course, what we can't do is do that from a position at the outset of initially behaving in that manner towards you, because if we were to do that, as I've just mentioned, we would lose control of you. So what we have to do is save, in effect. The narcissism saves showing the dark side until later, because by that stage you've been suitably embedded that when it appears, you don't first time around go, oh my goodness, what a horrible man, I'm out of here. You go, what's wrong? Why aren't you talking to me? Or what have I'm sorry I upset you and made you shout at me. I won't do it again.
Right.
And so the dark side, if you will, the narcissism allows that to be shown. So basically the narcissism creates both the pleasant side and the nasty side as a means of controlling you, carrot and the stick, the honey and the nettles, whatever you want to describe it as, and that's what you're seeing. But both of them are constructed by the narcissism to help us to get to the prime aims. Both are there to control you. Both are there to draw fuel from you. Both are there to get character traits. Both are there to get those all-important residual benefits. So they are both constructed. And so when you see that nasty side, that isn't actually the true narcissist, the true self. It is part of the construct that's being utilized against you.
Yeah. It's like intermittent reinforcement at its best.
Well, indeed, and that plays into the addiction. You see,
Yeah.
normal people don't have the addiction. So when they are first exposed either to excessive admiration or flattery, they think, whoa, this is too much, I'm out of here. Or if they don't, more or less when they start to be badly treated, because normal people can get ensnared by a narcissist too, it does happen, that their response is, nobody treats me like this, F you, and they're out of there. Whereas the empath, driven by emotional thinking and their own addiction, they don't see it for what it is. They think, this person is abusing me. I'm not putting up with this. I'm gone. Instead, it's, what have I done wrong? And why are we falling out? Everything was wonderful before. I need to get back to that.
Right. It's funny, like that's typical intermittent reinforcement that the narcissist is using without even realizing it. And it's how casinos keep people coming back. It's you win one.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. And then you think, oh my goodness, I'm going to win every time. And that's not.
Yeah. And then when you start to lose, you chase your losses to try and get the win back. And it's exactly the same with this. Now you're losing, but I was winning. I want to get back to the winning, rather than thinking my winning streak has ended, I better quit while I'm relatively ahead. No, you don't. You hang in there. Yeah,
exactly. Sounds good. And that's very enlightening. And again, Hg, you're always so knowledgeable about everything. I mean, I throw all these questions at you and you're really able to answer them. It's your knowledge is really vast, and I'm very appreciative of that.
Thank you. And that's what comes with being an expert.
Absolutely. I'm going to wrap up part 3, but I'm looking forward to part 4 to continue the questions that I had to ask you to continue. Yes.